Hello, and welcome to today's presentation brought to you by the Life Sciences team at ReadTech. Today's presentation is Ask the Experts, ReadTech and 1WorldSync, the role of medical device UDI and GDSN in regulatory compliance strategy. We are so pleased to introduce our panelists for today's talk. Scott Brown is a Senior Director of Global Data Strategy with 1WorldSync. He has a wide-ranging experience in data governance, community and program management, and industry supply data strategies. And Gary Sainer is our Senior Regulatory Principal at ReadTech. He is a subject matter expert on medical device unique device identification and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. In this installment of our Ask the Experts series, we will cover learning how 1WorldSync and ReadTech work together to develop winning product data management strategies. We'll get an update on health authorities around the globe and UDI timelines. We'll find out who is asking for data in the Global Data Synchronization Network and why they need it, and what are the best practices for creating, collecting, cleansing, and compliance of product data. This meeting is being recorded. Just a little housekeeping, it's being recorded for future reference, and all audience members are muted. However, we will encourage questions, so please put those in the question box. We will be sending out the recording and the slides to everyone following the meeting. My name's Sam Page. I'm Marketing Manager here at ReadTech, and now I'll let our hosts take it away.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. So I want to give you just a brief update on who 1WorldSync is and what we're about. So 1WorldSync is a data platform, and we help orchestrate product content. We help suppliers from manufacturers, distributors, we go through recipients, hospitals, clinics, all that, and help them share product content from one side of the selling relationship to the other. That way they understand and have a clear picture of what items and processes are. And so that allows people to be able to work with those items and work with the messaging and work with invoicing and shipping and ordering and all those practices to better enable commerce and make it more effective. We'll go to the next slide, Gary. So with that, I'll give you a little bit more about the numbers that we have. So as a data pool, we are the world's largest data pool. You can see there our range of customers and our coverage inside of the network itself. This covers a broad range of categories, but it does allow us the opportunity to share our over 20-year experience in this space with companies and help them move their products along. Next slide. So when we look at product master data, we look at it in three kind of areas, if you will. We have normal supply chain information that's talking about the cases and their weights and dimensions and the life cycle of the products, things like that. We look at the packaging hierarchy because it's not just about the cases, it's about what's inside the cases. And so understanding how that case is configured and what you'll find inside there is important. And that can help in making sure that you have accurate inventory and you're shipping correctly. And then lastly, we have user-facing content. When it comes to healthcare, user-facing content goes towards the clinicians and the hospitals, helping them understand the MRI complexities, any allergen or sensitivities that are in the product, how much comes into a product, how many different doses or uses or those types of things that are there. We also have a different version of this. If you're going through a retail outlet, you may hear it called consumer-facing content. And that's where you go online and you're working through an online vendor to get extra information about a product that you're looking for. So these are the types of solutions that we'll bring and offer as a company to folks that want to work with us.
Gary, you want to tell us about ReadTech?
Sure, thanks, Sam. Glad to share a little bit about the ReadTech company. We are in the industry of helping those in the life sciences work with their requirements to meet various compliance requirements for health authorities, and also share information with their customers and trading partners. So we position ourselves between the manufacturer and those downstream users. We provide solutions in the medical device, pharmaceutical, and cosmetic sectors, and are able to smooth the submission process, the data management, collection, and just the overall interactions between the manufacturer and the health authority. Just a couple metrics that'll quickly move through. One of those up front would be, with a huge amount of experience going back 20 years now with some of the activities in the life sciences, we have learned to accommodate many different scenarios and are able to provide expertise in that industry. We have put together systems that are compliant to all the regulations, 21 Part 11 and so on, and have submitted a huge amount of data to the FDA Good ID, which is this database collecting information about medical devices. Been very fortunate to provide roughly 1/3 of all those electronic records, and have a game plan and roadmap to accommodate additional health authorities in the future. So there's a number already in play. We'll talk some more about that later, but it has not stopped now. There's additional medical device requirements coming on the horizon. And very fortunate to provide our solution to well over 450 medical device customers. And there are a number of relationships that we have in industry, various associations, standards. One of them, which I'll highlight, is the 1WorldSync Alliance. So we're very glad to partner with Scott and friends over at 1WorldSync. And then there's others that you can take a look at. Real quickly, some of the benefits of working with ReadTech would be that you're able to save costs and use the existing development platform that we have, or data management platform. So it saves your development cost, and you can ramp that up very quickly. Onboarding is straightforward. And then it does save your internal resources. So this is a connection to a software as a service model that we host without any intrusion on your particular internal repository. And then a couple more key benefits. This is well-proven, trustworthy system. Goes back since the inception of managing UDI data for medical devices, and allows you to decrease your risk. So you never want to be out of compliance or have misbranding issues or something that is not submitted on time. That would interrupt your delivery of goods and your revenue stream. And we do have this future-proof certificate, if you will, that allows you to have a very scheduled and timed release of information to keep it current, and then also to move into different health authorities as they progress over the course of time. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sam, and I think maybe we'll get into the meat of the conversation today. Oh,
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Yep.
There we go.
Thank you so much for telling us a little bit more. Maybe now we can talk a little bit about how 1WorldSync and ReadTech work together.
Well, I can start off there, and then I'm going to ask Scott to jump in. But this 5-phase product life cycle is pretty well seen by everyone in the audience. Probably nothing new here, working from initial discovery down through distribution. But we're going to highlight a couple points along that pathway. The regulatory registration and UDI reporting. So during the course of that regulatory approval, before you actually start distribution, there's a prerequisite that you register your establishment, list your products, and report UDI information to the health authority. Now, some of those are, well, each health authority has their own type of implementation to have that happen. In concept, it's all a prerequisite before you go to distribution. Now, we've used the term UDI, and I'm assuming everyone in the audience are familiar with that, but real quickly, UDI stands for Unique Device Identification. This is a identifier initiative actually started with the FDA, but now has progressed to many different health authorities that provides a very granular, accurate identification of a product and the company that's associated with it as well. And that started back in 2013 timeframe with some regulations in effect in 2014 and later. So it's moved across the globe. Now, the other touch point that we're going to highlight today is once you start that distribution, obviously there is a need to communicate that product information to your downstream customers and trading partners. Today we'll be highlighting GDSN. So again, real quickly for that acronym, if you're unfamiliar with it, Global Data Synchronization Network. This is a network that Scott's going to share a lot more information on as a data pool that's operating inside that network. But this is a way to communicate that identification to customers. Both of these concepts, UDI and GDSN, have attributes over and above just an identifier, but there's a number of attributes that describe the actual product in a structured type of a format. And the particular attributes that are related to UDI, there's roughly 57 of those. Many of those are flowed into the GDSN. So there's a subset of regulatory content and regulatory attributes that are inside a broader data set inside GDSN. So there is some certainly some interaction. I think we laid some groundwork here about the topics that we'll get into and some interaction. To talk a little bit more about the actual question here about how do we collaborate, the relationship with 1WorldSync and ReTech goes back many years. We do have means to collect data that flows into the GDSN and have built and use a machine-to-machine connection from ReTech system to the 1WorldSync item master. And that supports this data flow that eventually gets published to the GDSN. I'm going to ask Scott to jump in here and talk a little bit more about a recent activity that has come about between the two companies.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So one of the things we've been doing, and then there's a press release that has been recently put out there talking about our collaboration. And so as two organizations, we realize there's a big synergy between what we're trying to do. And it will work best for our customers if we offer our services as they're set up to try and help them move forward. So in the press release, we talk about how we're going to be aligning activities and such so that there are users that are trying to get UDI data across, be it in the States, be it elsewhere in the world, and they can use ReTech to be able to do that. But then those same items might need to go into a normal outlet, be it a hospital or a normal retailer, a GPO, distributors, things like that. Those particular practices are probably going to be more susceptible to a GDSN type of approach because there's other pieces of information that they need that aren't in those regulatory filings. So when you talk about the dimensions, when you talk about the weights, when you talk about packaging material, things like that, those aren't in the regulatory the MDR requirements that you would see, the medical device registration requirements that you see. And so it performs a very cohesive kind of parallel track to the data that the two companies can put forward. And so that's why we've kind of refreshed our agreement on how we're working with each other and wanted to bring everybody together to kind of discuss that and let you guys know that it's available out there.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And it's a really good summary and actually a good lead into our next little topic here about getting into some details in the actual data flow and how this actually works in the real world. Let's talk a little bit about this diagram where we have manufacturers on the left-hand side with internal repositories that include both the regulatory product data and the commercial product data. And again, we talked a little bit earlier about, the regulatory would be a subset into a much broader type of attributes in the commercial data. So if we follow the red data flow, which would be that regulatory data, you're able to collect that data, transfer it to ReTech. We have a number of different options to accept that data. We do some internal validation, we do storage, we package that information and manage it and send it off to the health authority. And right now there's a number of health authorities that we support, the US, EU, South Korea, China, and so on. A number more that are about to be added to that list. But that takes care of, the first step, that prerequisite to gain final approval from the health authority and then comply with the reporting requirements. Now, that data is used by many downstream users. They can go to these public repositories. But the other parallel stream that we want to talk about is the commercial data. So this is an enriched set of data over and above what the regulatory content includes. And I mentioned earlier that we can accept that data here in the ReTech and acting as a data hub. We can direct commercial regulatory data over to health authorities and particular ones through gateways. But then we're also able to serve the trading partner in the commercial pathway as well by taking the commercial data that we receive, again, managing it, versioning it, storing it, and validating, do a preliminary pre-check and so on. And then with the machine-to-machine connection, pass that over to 1WorldSync. Scott, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about the details here. Once you receive that data from ReTech, what do you do with it, and how does it get down to that trading partner, the actual customer?
Yeah, so I'll start talking a little bit about it. We've got a couple more slides later where we'll go into a little bit more detail. But 1WorldSync acts as that aggregator to pull this type of data together. You'll have some spaces where there'll be some additional content that you can add based on what you need to share with those commercial trading partners. Then we use a thing called the Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN. And that is a global space. There's 46 different data pools that operate in that space. 1WorldSync is the largest one there. And we're able to pass that information along through network messaging to those trading partners, or we also call them recipients that might need them. And those are, your retailers, your normal retailers, your pharmacies, drugstores, hospitals, clinicians, GPOs, but various different folks that are out there. And then they can take that information, load it into their systems, and be able to utilize that as they go through their normal operating processes. So this vehicle allows for that direct ability to share that content. And as I mentioned a moment ago, to be clear, it will carry some of the same stuff that you might be sending to a regulator, but understand there's a lot more that is needed in a commercial space than is needed by the regulator. And so our messaging set and the GDSN structure allow for that extra set of content to be added. Now, Gary was talking about how you can put both sets of data into ReTech and then pass that commercial set of data down to 1WorldSync. There are folks out there that are coming directly into 1WorldSync to be able to provide that content directly across. There's not a problem with that, because when you look at things that are out there, there are companies that do have certain things that are medical device registry compliant, where they need to put those into those regulatory databases, but they also make some things that aren't, that are not regulated in that medical device sector. And so this allows you to have the best of both worlds, because you can either do everything into ReTech and share things that need to go each way, the way they do, or there are some folks that have two different sides to their company, and so that commercial data can come straight in. So there's various different options that both Gary and I can share with you and talk with you about what makes sense for your organization.
Yeah, that's a good summary, Scott. Let's take a look at some of the benefits. using this data hub model. The first couple there, I'm going to highlight one of the primary benefits, and probably the most significant one. I probably ought to bold that in an extra large font, but achieving global regulatory compliance. So being able to meet the registration, listing, UDI reporting requirements is certainly paramount. But then in addition to that, you want to do that in an efficient manner, save as much cost as possible, make sure that it's reliable, and have a system and a pathway so that this particular data can flow to downstream stakeholders. There are two additional benefits, a little bit more related to the GDSN. Scott, do you want to pick up those items 3 and 4 there?
So the first thing about the GDSN is it's live, it's real time. So you can come in and make a change, and everybody who has accepted that item as something that they want to work with, they'll immediately get those changes. Now, I say immediately, it's a matter of how often they pull down. But for the most part, everybody's pulling down several times a day, if not several times an hour. And so they can grab those changes as soon as they're available. Well, that provides a very good benefit to make sure that they have the right information when they're loading trucks, when they're placing orders, when they're talking to their end user, their consumer or customer that is working with that product. So that's very important, that as products change, and while we understand that the healthcare products, medical devices don't change that much, when it comes to commercial data, it still does change as much as a regular consumer item. So when you talk about, the features and benefits, or when you talk about how you're marketing a product, those things you want to change over time. You don't want your item to get stale in the marketplace. And so as you make those changes, those little tweaks to verbiage or wording, or you're putting in the new buzzword and how you're describing that feature or benefit, or you're adding imagery to your item, those go out right away. And everybody knows that those are accurate because they're coming from the manufacturer, they're coming from the source. We sometimes call that the trusted source of data. So at the end of the day, you have this understanding that what you need in that commercial space is going to be provided, and that you can trust that data. So now it's one of those end trading partners, those recipients that are getting that data. They understand what they're getting, and they know that they can trust what's coming through the network.
Very good. I think that is a quick summary of that topic. Sam, I'm going to hand this back to you to introduce the next section.
Sure. And Gary, I'm sure you'll take the lead here on telling us about global health authorities and news and updates for UDI.
Sure. There's a changing dynamic landscape, and Sam, we've updated this section, multiple times over the years. So you have to keep abreast of what's going on and keep, updating the details. And this is not the comprehensive list. There's actually a little bit more detail in the appendix that Sam will be making available when we distribute the materials. But I wanted to highlight these 5 health authorities. They have regulations in play: US, China, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and there's obviously some others. But then I really want to emphasize EU, because this is on the cusp of becoming mandatory, voluntary, since way back in 2021. But 2026, January, starts a mandatory period. So that, 12, 13, 14 months away, not a whole lot of time to do the final preparation and get everything in play. Many companies are certainly active on that. But then, in addition to these 5, once you finally meet those requirements for this particular set of health authorities, unfortunately, it doesn't stop there, and the list keeps growing. So the 3 more that we'll talk about for a second here, and again, it's not a comprehensive list. Australia in the bottom right here is making a lot of progress, very good progress, in putting together a database putting policy together. There's waiting for some final resolution of some legislation to roll out UDI, but they have a pre-production environment up and running. We've submitted data to that particular environment. And anyway, I think Australia coming on very strong. And then followed by Switzerland, also some progress emulating the European Union UDI. And then Brazil, there's activity going on. So there's an ongoing list of health authorities that are adopting UDI. Now, with all the attention on the European Union, I want to share a little bit more information about that. It's obviously the most frequent topic that we get in the last 9 months. What's going on with the UDI and that database that the Commission is setting up. So if we do a real quick look at the timeline, there's 2 dates of application, one for medical device regulation and one for an in vitro diagnostic regulation. And there are 6 modules inside UDI with various functions, 4 of which are in the first wave of implementation. So they're batched together, if you will. And the one that is most relevant to this industry and as far as reporting data goes is this UDI device module. So that has some history going back to 2021. These 4 modules would be audited, and then eventually the Commission rolls out a notice saying, okay, everything passed, it's fully functional. And then boom, we have this target date, January 1st, 2026, where there's a mandatory phase of these 4 modules. UDI has a 6-month transition grace period. The other 2 modules, let's talk real quickly about that. There's a vigilance module, a little bit behind in that development, and it'll have its own audit and announcement and then mandatory portion. And then what I call the problem child, the clinical investigation and performance study module. That is way behind in development. Turns out to be rather a significant challenge for the Commission. But now there's some targets that eventually the development would be completed and an audit performed, and eventually maybe perhaps in 4th quarter of 2027 that would become mandatory. Real quickly, these mandatory dates at one point in time had to coincide based on legislation. So the last module that would be available would set the timing for all. And earlier this year, there's a regulation that was passed to break that bond where everything had to be done before the first module would be used. And now individual modules can be set in place and made mandatory individually. So that now caused the Commission to reschedule things and move these 4 modules early on. I don't think I'll have to redo this slide, but I'm crossing my fingers. It could very well happen. So I doubt that there's changes. There's actually good progress being made. But the word to the wise, keep an ear to the European Commission announcements. Now, this is the various modules and reporting registration. There's another aspect, and many in the audience are concerned about their actually delivery of products and the goods that are actually sold, right? So there is a topic that surrounds placing on the market. So this is the actual delivery of the goods. There is an extended period of time for those products referred to as legacy products that have a certificate dating way back to prior to the medical device regulation date of application way back in 2021. There might have been a certificate that was provided under directive. They are actually still in play if you meet some criteria. If you don't meet that criteria, or if you bring a brand new product out, doesn't have a history of a legacy certificate, then you do have to comply with MDR. And anyway, there are some timings for that. I won't go into it, but there's a similar conversation for in vitro diagnostics. The concepts are similar. The dates are a little bit different, a little bit more detail, But if you have questions on the in vitro diagnostic or the medical devices, please get a hold of us and we'll be glad to share that. So Sam, let me turn this back to you. I think we're ready for our next section.
Sure. Well, we'd all like to know a little bit more about who is asking for data and global data synchronization network and why they need it. Scott, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can do that. So I want to start off and let's talk about first where GDSN came from and where it belongs. So the Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN, is a service that is part of the standard set that GS1 operates on a global level. GS1 is a federated organization. It's based out in Brussels, and it manages standards around identification, barcoding, scanning, RFID, data sharing, location management, those types of services. And we'll talk in a moment about what some of those colloquial terms are that you'll be recognizing. But in that federated model, they have 114 organizations around the world that operate in various different target markets, and a target market's a country. And you'll see them referred to as GS1 US, GS1 UK, GS1 Germany, GS1 Australia. And so that's the naming that they have. But all of them are a not-for-profit organization. They're some people also call them a third-party neutral. And with that, they're able to provide the standards that are available and work with their communities to bring new standards into play or amend the standards that are out there in various different industries. And you can see the industries listed there. There are other industries that they work with, but these are the primary ones that they are focused on right now. On the next slide, Gary. So in that, the system of standards that they operate, they fall into three buckets primarily: identify, capture, and share. And so identify brings in those markers, identifications, those types of things. Some of the ones you probably have heard of is a global location number, or a GLN. You've probably heard of a global trade item number, or a G10. Those are probably the two most familiar. There's several others that are out there. On this particular slide, they have examples of a serialized shipping container code, as well as the serialized G10 number, which is used in an RFID tag. But these are used synonymously up and down the supply chain. And so this first line here talks about the supply chain all the way from the source through distribution and out to a healthcare provider. And so you can see the various different places where these might be done. Now, Gary has done a great job of talking so far on this phone call about a thing called the UDI, or the Unique Device Identifier. At the end of the day, if you're using the GS1 systems of standards, that UDI is a G10. In most of the UDI regulations, there's a couple of different identification systems that you can use. And for the GS1 system, that would be the G10. Now, the capture is where you actually encode that in some type of capture device. Most commonly, that's a barcode. If you look there on the left, that very first one, you're all probably familiar with. Whenever we go to the grocery store, whenever we go to a department store, whenever we go to any type of retail outlet, that is commonly used, to the point that it scans several billion times a day around the world. The next two there are primarily used in the supply chain. So if you were to go out into a warehouse, or if you were to look at a case of goods, you're probably going to see one of those two on that particular set of packaging. The data bar you're probably familiar with, because you'll see a version of that on fruits and vegetables. That carries a little bit more information than the previous barcodes, and it also can be printed in a very small format. In medical devices and in pharmaceuticals, you're also going to see the GS1 data matrix heavily used. That's the barcode that is preferred in healthcare, is to use that. It is what's called, and it's different from the barcodes to the left. The barcodes to the left, you'll notice, are pretty much straight line. Those are called 1D barcode because they have to be read in one dimension. But the GS1 data matrix changes things. It can be read in two dimensions, left to right or top to bottom, or even in angles. And so with that, it's called a 2D barcode. You're gonna start to see a lot more of that starting to flow over into the retail space over the next few years, but that's a topic for another phone call. But in healthcare, it allows you to do several different things. because you can not only put that G10 in there, but you can also put those controls that you use, the production date, the expiration date, the serial number, the batch lot number, the software number. Those types of things can be encoded in there as well, and they can't necessarily be encoded in some of the barcodes to the left. So healthcare has pulled that in. Then also you can use this same numbering system in RFID chips, and there's several different use cases for those in healthcare that are coming along. The bottom is what we've been talking about a lot here today, is the share. How do you move that data across? And so there's really a couple of different types of data that are there. The one we've been talking about here, and we'll continue to talk about for a little bit, is master data. That's the sharing of the what that a product is. GDSN is probably the biggest example of how to do that, although there are some others, but predominantly that's where you would see that, especially when you talk about the GS1 system of standards. Then there's transactional data. If you think about transactional data being an order, an invoice, a shipping notification, those types of things, any type of track and trace event has some form of transactional data inside of it. The last one are those true track and trace events, the physical event data, where and when, and that uses the EPCIS, or the Electronic Product Catalog Information Service. So all of these are things that they use and pull together, and they list them in bars like this because you'll use a G10 and a GLN, and that will be scanned at a barcode, and that can be used in any of the transactional pieces down below. And when you talk about a serial shipping container code, that's a transactional barcode that's going to be in those EDI messages or other transactional messages. So it all flows together from seamlessly from one side to the other. Next slide. So let's dig in just a little bit deeper. I mentioned we were going to talk a little bit more about the GDSN and what that is. So as I said, the GDSN is a large place where you can share product information, both commercial data and consumer or user-facing data. There are tons of companies that are involved with this, and it doesn't matter what market you're in around the world. It doesn't matter what type of company you are. There is a way that GDSN can help you and support you. It is built kind of to be agnostic to a degree and has enough attributes to cover just about any type of product. But at the end of the day, it's providing that timely message from the moment it's put into the system all the way through changes and updates going through the system. So the basic model is what you see there in the screen. You have the people who are selling things. Those can be manufacturers, they can be distributors, they can be sales agents, they can be GPOs. And they're trying to send information to the buyers of those. And those can be some of the same people play both sides of the fence. You have distributors, you have the hospitals, the clinicians, the GPOs, the sales agents, as well as any of the retail outlets that might be out there doing it. And so in the middle of the square, I've got the 1WorldSync name there. And of course, I'm going to be a little biased when I say this, but there's 46 players that sit in the middle there where you see 1WorldSync. We're all considered certified data pools. At the end of the day, you really only have to belong to one of those certified data pools to go either direction in this chain. The GS1 Global Registry is a phone book that sits at the top of the pyramid. And what it does is GS1 manages that, and that lets them know where those items exist. In other words, what data pool has that supplier put that item on? And then on a recipient, what are the types of things that they're looking for? And so we call what the recipient is doing on that buy side a subscription, and what the supplier is doing on that sell side is a publication. And the registry manages the storing of those, and they do a match. And when there's a match, the data pools in the middle share that information across from one side to the other. We do that millions of times a day for the 76 million items that are out there. So this is the basic structure of how GDSN works. You can daisy chain this particular diagram together multiple times to go from the original source of the item through several distributors all the way out to that local clinic or the local hospital. But that's the basic premise behind this. Next slide. So the question was, who's using it, right? Who's involved with the GDSN? There are a lot of companies. In fact, I'm going to give you some stats in just a moment on the number of companies. But the traditional industry, if you will, where it all started is in food. So there are a lot of folks that are in food and grocery and normal retail, but some of those folks cross over into healthcare, automotive, DIY, various different spots. And we now have actually specific recipients that are in each of those individual industries. And so you'll see some of the names here, but there's probably, I think we're reaching around 2,800 or more recipients that are actually out there asking for data through the network around the world. When it comes to healthcare, we get a little bit more specific. There are some regulatory agencies that are using the GDSN, particularly in the Netherlands, they're doing that. There's a couple other spots around the world that will take a GDSN message when it comes to regulatory messages. Although we're seeing that there's not going to be that many that will, because most of them are looking to build their own messaging. And that's part of the reason why we're wanting to partner with ReTech, is because they have ability to take the item information and transform it into those regulatory messages and make sure it gets there. Then you have the GPOs. There's several of those that are online already. There's some like Syncora that are coming online. Syncora is actually going to be doing more than just medical devices. They're going to be doing pharmaceuticals. That way they can get not only the information that they need to process the medical devices and use that. For those, they're also looking to get the background information for DSCSA, the Drug Supply Chain Securities Act. So you can see a lot more information around that stuff coming along. And then you got the healthcare providers, those that are actually at the end of the chain. They're the ones that are going to use the products either in a hospital setting or a clinic setting or a doctor's office. And so those groups are looking for the data as well. One of the use cases that I always like talking about is USAID. They're taking medical devices and pharmaceuticals and taking them down into third world countries where there's an outbreak, and they've been able to bridge the gap across regulatory markers to get those items in and utilize those going forward. It makes a big difference in those third world countries where they can take something from the first world and not have to worry about all the local regulation to get it out to a malaria outbreak or to an AIDS epidemic that is going around. Next one. So I told you that I would give you some stats. Here's some of the stats, and I'll walk you through these just a little bit. So at the top box, this is the GDSN itself. There's about 44 million registered G10s in the network. And then the subscription, a subscription is between one recipient and one supplier for one G10. And so there's about 190 million subscriptions. And you don't have to subscribe to every single G10 because the way the hierarchies are built, if you subscribe at the highest level of the hierarchy, they'll get passed across. So those 190 million subscriptions cover all 44 million of those in various different configurations and setups going out to, as I said, the almost 3,000 recipients that are there. Now, to bring those into a little bit of perspective, on the left, I have the total number of GLNs there. Those are the global location numbers. So those are the user organizations that are in the network. So there's 76,000 of those. 1WorldSync has about half of those inside of our systems. We operate several different data pools, the ones that are named as 1WorldSync, but then our technology also backends a number of other data pools. And so with that, not only do we have the lion's share of the network itself as traffic and G10s, but we also have about 50% of the user organizations that are there. Now, if we break that down and we look at specifically just what's in healthcare, there is a product classification code that is on the items, which let us identify them as being healthcare items, whether they are going through a retail outlet or through to a regulator. It'll cover both of those, but you'll see that kind of in the numbers breakdown there. But there's about 6.1 million G10s that have been registered with a healthcare BRIC code across the world, and that is using 7,300 GLNs or organizational users that are there. Now, when we look at things that are broken down in there, things that are specifically called out as a regulatory device, there's about 5.2 million, and things that are called out as a regulatory pharmaceutical, that's 88,000. Now, the other healthcare, those are things that cross a regulated portal as well as a retail portal. So if it's something that you might see sold at Walgreens or at Tesco or one of those places that is regulated, but it has a retail outlet, it would fall into this lower bucket. So things like an analgesic, an over-the-counter analgesic, or a first aid kit, those types of things would fall into the 875 instead of the 5.2 million. So all in all, that's why we put them together here so that you can see them and see that for healthcare overall, it's 6.1 million. Now, all of this for healthcare is global. And to point that out, these 6.1 million G10s are registered for use in 254 countries around the world. And so it truly is, the G truly does mean global in this space. Now, some countries are more active than others. When you look at the US and Australia and a few other countries, they're heavily active. And some countries, when you go down into the Horn of Africa or down in South America, it's probably a little lighter used, but it's still used nonetheless. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Gary for the next topic, or Sam, I'm sorry, turn it over to Sam for the next topic.
Thank you so much for those clarifications. I feel like I know so much more now. What are the best practices for creating, collecting, cleansing, and compliance with product data? This is for both of you. I don't know, Scott, if you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start us off. So with this one, when you go through the practice and the setup, there are several different things that you want to start working through and working towards to help get you in the right path and in the right organization. So the first thing is you always have to start figuring out where your data is coming from. Everybody thinks it's going to be a little easy. Oh, it's just in our ERP, but it's not always there. Sometimes it's in Joe's head in the back, and everybody just goes ask him, and he tells them what it is. And sometimes it's in a filing cabinet over in accounting, or in a filing cabinet out at the pack warehouse. So you may have to find and pull those things together. But then you got to start building a governance policy around it. Make sure you understand how you're going to manage that over time. You know, what happens if that data changes? How do you pull that together? Who's responsible for that data? And then if it's possible, try to start centralizing that, right? Try to get it into your ERP. Try to get it into maybe 2 or 3 places as opposed to 50 or 60 places. One hospital, I love this story. She came into this spot and did number 1 and found out she had 160 different ERPs. And she had to go and figure out which ones were the right ones, and do we really need 160? What's the differences? And so the nice thing was they got it down to 60, but they still had more work to do to try and get it further down. But at the end of the day, what she was able to do was to make sure that everybody was using the same set of master data. And that's important, because you don't want to sit there and go out and make sure that everything out there has its own set and it's different from the other things. But then at the same point, as you're doing this type of work and getting things organized and pulled together, you don't want to lose the functionality you have. You don't want to hinder yourself in the future. And I think that's one of the things that healthcare system found, was that with 160 different systems, they were spending more time just making sure the systems were running than they were trying to move forward and allowing for the next thing coming down the line. So make sure you've got that scalability and that ability to move forward. At the same time, you also need to look at cost. Unfortunately, the world we live in, there's a finite amount of money to pay for what you're looking for. And some things can be expensive, depending on what you're doing. So make sure you're looking at the various different solutions you have, looking at the various different ways that you can move forward, and talking to folks about how can you be cost effective with what you're doing? How can you make the most out of what you have? Then you're going to come along and you're going to start looking at, okay, now that I've got all my data, now that I'm understanding where it is, and we're working on that path of getting it into a common place that we can pull from, or at least know where we can pull it from, you need to now start looking the other direction and looking at what people are asking for and seeing how your data aligns with what people are asking for. Now, some people might say, well, why wouldn't you do that in 1 or 2? You can. But at the end of the day, if you don't know where your data is, it doesn't matter what's being required. So at the end of the day, start understanding where your data is and what the sources are. Now that you've got that organized, start organizing what you need to give to people, because there's data that you have that you may not be able to give to people the way it is. So you want to look at that and start pulling that together. And then lastly, you're going to look at your external customers. Look at those folks that are using the UDI catalogs, the folks that are using the commercial data to start understanding what they want to do. And understand that in both these last steps, you may need a partner like ReadTech or 1WorldSync to help you uncover those, or to help you decipher what does that mean. When they ask this question, what does that mean? So that you can try and translate that from what you have into what you're doing. And at the end of the day, we both have tools that can help you convert your data and set your data up to be able to move forward with the various different folks that are in the marketplace. So, Gary?
Yeah, I think that was a great summary of a high-level approach to some of the things that need to be done to manage that data. There is a subset of all of that that is relative to unique device identification. And we do get a number of questions about, well, how do I go about attacking the UDI topic, and what should I be doing? So I've grouped some of these activities under the foundation area, where it's necessary to understand the regulations and identify what is applicable for your particular operation. So in some cases, if you can go through regulations and read, oh my goodness, there's many pages and pages of requirements, and it's good to have that background, but it's also just as important to realize what is applicable to your particular company, the products that you make, and not only knowing the requirements, but then also knowing what the exceptions might be. So certainly if an exception is out there that allows some cost savings, you want to make use of those exceptions in your particular approach. There is a plan that comes out of all that. Put that plan together, train your team, set up an environment, get those systems in place. Some cases there's companies upgrading or even replacing their infrastructure based on the UDI requirements coming into play. But have that particular concept in place, and these are all foundation activities that are able to lay a groundwork, if you will, for some of the actual compliance activities that you need to do. On top of that foundation, there's a group of technical activities. So Scott had mentioned pulling some of this data together, and it might be in various repositories. When you approach UDI, we have seen this first time the data set has ever needed to be assembled together. So you get bits of information over in regulatory, you get bits of information over in operations, in some cases over in sales, in other cases it's product design, multiple places, and sometimes there are omissions. So getting that data set, pulling that together is paramount in this technical area. Collecting those attributes and finding out what's missing, and then learning how to transfer that data. So just as important as collecting and cleansing, the other activity is to be able to manage it, have governance over it, and then transfer it. So how do you plan to report this information to the downstream health authorities? I would highly recommend that you put a pilot together, make sure that data is ready to go, and then exercise the method, your submission method, and then prepare for a production launch. As you work on these two areas, and some of these things can happen simultaneously, it's not necessarily step one, then you go to step two. You can do foundation and technical activities in parallel. But the benefit would be that you avoid the compliance deadline rush. And there is a number of activities that come and are accelerated and exaggerated in just the way many companies operate, the wait to the last minute. That puts a strain on actually the health authorities being able to support your questions. There's perhaps a strain on your vendors that you've been working with. You're competing for time. And internally, you only have so many resources, and you might have an issue with quality or the risk starting to degrade. The risk might go up if you rush through something, but by starting early, you're able to decrease that risk, and then finishing early or having additional reserve so that you can work on other pending health authorities. Remember, this is unfortunately not just one, and it's not a cookie cutter. So every time you approach a new health authority, there are some additional requirements. So real quickly, there are a number of steps along your way. Basically set up that environment, your accounts, train all the team and parties involved, your stakeholders, and get that process and standard operating procedures in place, and then go about collecting that data, submit it, and then unfortunately there is a life after. It does not stop with a one-time submission and then you can close the closet door and say, oh boy, I never have to open that again. Unfortunately, there's maintenance activities and there's changes over the course of time. So keeping that data fresh, regulations to make sure that you have updates when the attributes change. There's also retention requirements. US has 3 years after the product is off the market. EU has 10, 15 years, depending on the product. So quite a lengthy retention period. Unfortunately, this is not once and done. I'll leave this slide with you. It's a really quick recommendation, steps A, B, and C. First step, we're well into that. This is the middle of 2024, starting the third quarter period here. Collect and cleanse that data. We talked about that. And then we recommend submitting that data to the UDI playground. So this is the unofficial playground, allows you to exercise submission and get any feedback, complete that full soup to nuts data flow, and then eventually ABC, collect, cleanse, submit, and then finally C, submit UDI early. If you're able to, sometimes you're requested by downstream parties, and some health authorities have, some competent authorities actually have recommended some early submissions. But anyway, make sure that this part is done right here. Submit to the production environment, keeping in mind that 6-month window in black, starting in the 1st of 2026. And with that, Sam, I'm going to turn this back over to you. It looks like we went a little bit long, but maybe there's a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, we actually do have several questions, and so anything we don't get to today, because we are very close to time, will be responded to post this meeting. But to get started, I will, this one refers specifically to slide 14. So Gary, I don't know if you wanted to go ahead and pull that up.
Sure.
The question is, so should the red and the gray data in this slide be targeted to different GLNs when we send to read tech, or is it split afterwards?
Yeah, so the target end user, the GLN, is embedded in that particular record. So you can control as a manufacturer which of your many customers receive that information, or you can submit it to many of those simultaneously. So the GLN does need to be specified in this flow of data into the read tech. That is what controls that record and publication, and also who is syndicated to actually receive that data. So the answer is yeah, that GLN needs to be included in the initial data record.
Okay, and then I've got one more question, and then I think we'll let everybody go. But this question is maybe for you, Scott. Having read tech managing health authorities, will it be possible to have 1WorldSync manage the communication to read tech? And will publication to health authorities be able to be managed through APIs?
That's a good question. And yes, there is going to be a method where these arrows you could start in 1WorldSync and go over to read tech and go out. As we do this process and go through that, there may need to be some data adjustments made in read tech once the data lands, maybe some top off or conversion of some of the data that's coming in. But yeah, so you can start in 1WorldSync and go out to ReTech. Now, the use of APIs, let ReTech and 1WorldSync manage that. As a supplier putting in data, don't worry about how the data gets to the end recipient. Now, if you want to use an API to connect your system to us, both of us do have options for that, and we can do that.
Thank you. So yeah, we're at time, a little over actually. I want to thank our panelists, Scott Brown and Gary Stainer. I will be reaching back out to you to get some answers for questions we didn't necessarily get to during the meeting. All the slides will be sent out with a recording of the presentation. So if you need to look back to anything, I know we all love to use these slides for other things. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.